Andrea Palladio, we like to think of him as probably the most influential architect in history. Palladio designed many wonderful buildings, a whole string of villas, town palaces, churches, but he also wrote about architecture. Americans, such as Thomas Jefferson, never saw actual Palladian buildings. They never saw any of the wonderful drawings that we have on display here. But what they did was have his book. Jefferson was intensely interested in architecture. He was self-trained as an architect, and he acquired an edition of Palladio as early as the 1760s, and he owned maybe 7 or 8 editions of Palladio's work during his lifetime. As we've often heard, he called Palladio's work the Bible. When a friend asked his advice on architecture and building his own house, he told his friend, said, "Palladio is the Bible. Get that and stick with it." Jefferson's first experiment with Palladian architecture was with his own house, Monticello, as we know, right outside of Charlottesville. He began work on that as early as the 1760s, and he was determined with that house to show a correct use of Roman architecture applied to a domestic work. Put a portico on it, and that's a signal that an important person lives there. It pumps up the house. It gives it a dignity of respect. And of course, he was first introduced to the architecture of ancient Rome through Book 4 of Palladio's treatise. And in that Book 4 are several illustrations of the Maison Carre, probably the best preserved of all Roman temples. It's in southern France. It's the one ancient building that Jefferson actually saw. Maison Carre is a very small building. The Virginia State Capitol is twice its size. But Jefferson was determined to fit the offices of a republican form of government in a temple form building. It was to him to be a temple of democracy. And it marked the birth of the classical revival movement in America, and it also established the precedent of using monumental Roman architecture for our public buildings. And we can certainly see the effects of that right here in Washington, where most of our major public buildings are designed in monumental Roman classicism. Certainly the most famous landmark in America is our own United States Capitol. Now, the Capitol has evolved in appearance over the years. And in the mid-19th century, of course, the new Senate and House wings were added to the Capitol, making it very much in the Palladian spirit of a 5-part structure: central part, lower wings, and then bigger terminal wings with porticos on them. And it was determined that that stretched-out building needed a much larger dome, so Thomas Hugh Walter, who was the architect for the expansion, designed the dome that we see today. And it's interesting because that dome is ultimately based on a little domed structure that Palladio illustrated in Quattro Libri in the 4th book. And that is the prototype for literally hundreds of Renaissance domes, including our own state capital, or our own national capital, and many state capitals, and many churches and public buildings throughout Europe. When we see an ancient temple with a big portico on it, we think, gosh, that is an important building. What goes on in there must be pretty important stuff. You are, I think, struck with awe. When you approach the Supreme Court, you know that what goes on in there is pretty important stuff, that it really is a sacred function of our governmental institution. It's supposed to command respect. But I think you can say that Palladio's influence can be seen in hundreds and hundreds of buildings throughout the United States.